Shalom and welcome to Messianic Moments. My name is Jorge Sedaka. I'm National Director of Chosen People Ministries here in Canada and your host of this, our first presentation of Messianic Moments in Canada. We are delighted that you allow us to come into your home to share insights and meditations and the good news of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah of Israel and of the whole world. This is the season of Pesach, or Passover, a time where we as Jewish people celebrate God's redemption story that happened many centuries ago of His liberation from slavery in Egypt. So our guest for this program is Ben Volman, Messianic Rabbi at Kehillat Eytz Chaim, or Tree of Life congregation, here in Toronto. He will be sharing some insights and how the meaning and symbolism of Passover is fulfilled in the person of Yeshua HaMashiach.
Shalom. I'm Messianic Rabbi Ben Volman. I'm pleased to welcome you to this show where we are introducing you to the elements of the Seder, the Passover, as has been celebrated in Jewish homes, and as I celebrated it in my home growing up, and as Jewish people celebrate it in their homes as well. This is a celebration that shows us how Yeshua, Jesus the Messiah, also celebrated the Passover. All the elements that you see here will be shown and explained to you because they are indeed following the same traditions that Yeshua, Jesus, also followed with his disciples during the very last Passover Seder that he celebrated with them 2,000 years ago. The elements that you see here, they are all traditionally part of Passover, which takes place in the home, not in the temple, not in the synagogue, but it has always taken place in the home. The Father leads the celebration there, and Jesus, as he gathered with his disciples on a evening in Jerusalem, also gathered around a table, a low-lying table, in fact, they too celebrated. Now, there was one thing that had to be removed and was part of the preparation always of Passover, and that is the removal of leaven. Traditionally, the father and the children on the night before Passover will make sure that their home has been completely cleaned of all the leaven. That means that all the cakes, all the cookies, all the bakery goods, anything that even swells up like leaven has been removed. Leaven is a symbol of sin. But in our home, it is completely removed the night before Passover. And the father and the children go around, make sure that it's completely clean. They say a blessing. And the night of Passover comes. The mother opens the evening with the lighting of lights. As she does so, she sweeps her hands around the flame and she takes the candle, lighting it for the family as they all watch, listening while she recites these words, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Pesach. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies this night of Passover and commands us concerning the lighting of the Passover lights. The Father is the king and priest over the celebration in his home. As he lifts a cup, this is the blessing which he recites, singing it for the family. Certainly, these are the words which Yeshua said for his disciples so long ago. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen, amen. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth the fruit of the vine. With these words, Passover begins. It is the evening time. The family has sat around the table, and before they do anything, the father first must wash his hands. He washes his hands using a special bowl, and as he does so, he makes sure that they are washed, both hands, and in this way, he prepares himself to begin the Passover celebration. You know that Yeshua, Jesus, did not simply wash his hands. He got up from the table, and what did he do? He began to wash his disciples' feet. In fact, this is a table of love, not simply of tradition. When Yeshua stands up from the table and serves his disciples in that way, he says to them afterwards, if I, your Lord and Rabbi, have served you in this way, how much more now should you serve others? As the family sits around the table, and they are usually a large family. Jewish families are large. They all will have a copy of this book, which is called the Haggadah. Haggadah means the telling, and this is the story of Passover for the entire family to follow along. All the traditions, all the hymns, all the praises, all the little traditions are contained inside the family Haggadah. Now, it takes about 3 to 4 hours for the family to go through the entire evening. So how, at the time of Yeshua, Jesus, how would they have known all this tradition? How could they have made sure that they did everything right? Well, the rabbis divided the evening into 4 cups. Each cup has a special part. The first cup is called the cup of praise, which we've already lifted up, the cup of sanctification. Afterwards, there is a special cup to remind us of the plagues in Egypt. Afterwards, there is a supper. Then a very important third cup, sometimes called the cup of praise or the cup of Hallel. And then a last cup, the cup of Elijah. So the evening proceeds through 4 cups. The family follows along, and the father leads using the Haggadah as his guide. Now that the family is all set and ready, they begin with special traditions, but I want us to focus right now on this tradition of the matzotash, which contains the unleavened bread, which the family can only use during Passover. The matzotash, and this is a lovely, attractive one, will always contain 3 pieces of matzah. It's sometimes called a unity. The father will reach inside the matzotash and he will take out one of the pieces of matzah. Now, it's very specific. The father will reach in and take out of the 3, the middle piece. He goes past the top piece. He takes out the middle piece of matzah. He displays it for his family, and he says these important words. Behold, the bread of affliction, which our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. Let all those who are hungry come and eat. And the father also says some special words which I'll share later. Now, before we take out or use the bread, we must say our blessing. Listen carefully to the blessing which is always said over the bread and which we'll share over this piece of matzah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. The father takes this matzah and he divides it in 2. The second piece he puts aside. He sets it aside for a special reason. It's not going to be eaten until the end of the supper. It's the very last thing eaten. It's called the afikomen. I just like to use my talit bag for the afikomen, and indeed, the family pays a lot of attention to this because as the children are sitting around the table, and there are many children in many Jewish families, they're all paying attention because the afikomen later will be hidden. And when it's found, the one who finds it gets a great reward. Now, you're starting to understand that there are many, many traditions around Passover. Some people say to me, Ben, why do Jewish people do it? Why are you so scrupulous about following Passover with such attention to not eating any of those items that might possibly have leaven in them for 8 whole days? And the reason is this. It's given in Exodus chapter 12. When you come into the land and your children say to you, why do you do these things? You shall say to them, this is the Lord's Passover. Indeed, the father begins to explain to his family so that they will understand this is not something that happened a long time ago. Indeed, this is something that he speaks as if he himself had been laboring in Egypt, had been suffering under the oppression of Pharaoh, as if he himself, having witnessed the plagues, now had also walked through the Red Sea. The Father speaks as if he was there. This is not tradition from long ago. This is indeed tradition, which reminds us of God's immediate salvation for each of us. And so, as we go through the rest of the evening, the family wants to pay attention to some special items which now lead them back into the Passover experience. And they do so allowing one of the children to lead them by reading 4 questions. The 4 questions are contained and are called the Mageed here in the Passover Haggadah. And the child reads them traditionally in Hebrew, singing them, beginning with this melody, Ma nishtana halala hazeh min kol halelot, which means, why is this night different from all other nights? And then the child continues, on all other nights we may eat many vegetables, but on this night we eat maror, or bitter herbs. On all other nights we do not dip even once, but on this night twice. And on all other nights we eat either sitting or reclining, but on this night we all recline. And so the child, using the Haggadah, leads the family and allows us now to experience Passover as taste and touch and smell together through special foods, which I'll show you as we proceed further.
You are watching Messianic Moments. Our special guest today is Rabbi Ben Volman, presenting Messiah in the Passover.
The Passover continues with the family taking these special items of food which they share together, beginning, first of all, the evening with this item, which is Corpus or Greens. The Corpus or Greens is a beautiful symbol of springtime, life and hope, and now it is dipped. The child notes that things are dipped at this table. This is dipped in salt water, and as the family and the father share the Corpus or Greens around, they dip this life and symbol of hope into salt water, as if when we were in Egypt, all life, all hope seemed immersed in tears. The father will now share the Corpus and Greens. It's one of the first things eaten at the table. Secondly, the family will share this special item, which was certainly at Yeshua's and Jesus' table as well. This item is apple. It's been mixed with cinnamon, nuts, perhaps some honey, and a drop of wine as well. This is called the horseradish, or the mortar. It reminds us, because of the apple, of the terrible oppression we suffered under Pharaoh because we were making bricks. This is the color of those bricks. And so this mortar reminds us of the bricks that we used and made when we were in Egypt. The interesting thing is that the family actually takes this a special way. They take it between 2 pieces of matzah, and they will actually make a bit of a sandwich of it. As they do so, they specifically take the matzah and the horseradish together. This is how we were instructed to do it by the great scholar Hillel, who precedes Yeshua Jesus by about 50 years. At Yeshua's table, he offered this to someone at the table as a gesture to them of grace. The person was Yehuda, Judas, across the table from him. Soon afterwards, he leaves the table. John says to us after he goes, night falls. It's no longer simply twilight. Another very important item at our table is maror. It is the horseradish, and this is rather red horseradish that we have with us, and it is taken the same way. The family actually takes a couple pieces of matzah, as it did with the horseradish. They make a bit of a sandwich of it. It's hard to believe, but they eat about a teaspoon of horseradish and share that, everybody taking as much as they can take between 2 pieces of matzah, and also they may dip it in the horseradish as well. You know, people say to me as well, Ben, given the bitterness of the evening, why is the horseradish so sweet? Why is it so pleasant to the taste? For which we have a couple of answers. First of all, because when we were in Egypt, there was still some sweetness of hope for us. And secondly, it certainly takes the edge off the maror. Now, as we sit around the table, one other thing is at our table, but not a Passover lamb. There's no Passover lamb for us, even though for thousands of years our people celebrated with a Passover lamb. We have no temple today. The temple burned to the ground in 70 AD, and as a sign of our grief and mourning, we have instead an egg. An egg is eaten at funerals in the Middle East. This is a sign of our grief. But the egg is not simply just hard-boiled. It is actually roasted. It's roasted in an oven, and we make sure there are burn marks on it. This reminds us, too, of the temple that was destroyed, a further sign of our grief. The eggs are eaten later during the evening, but the father also wants to show this to his family. It is the shank bone of a lamb, the reminder that the whole evening was about the lamb. And the father shows the shank bone of the lamb, called the zeroah. And once he shows it to his family, by the way, this is the term which we find in the Bible that says the arm of the Lord. That's what this is called, the zeroah. Once the family shows this to the family, he now can begin to tell the story of Passover. And the story of Passover is the story of salvation and hope. The story of being without any sense that God could possibly help us. And then the arrival of a Savior, someone who confronts Pharaoh, confronts evil, and says, "Let our people go that we may worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." That hope, that promise being fulfilled is what Passover is all about. Because at the time when Moses arrives and confronts Pharaoh and says to him, "Let my people go," he then confronts him with 10 plagues, each one of which is a confrontation of the Egyptian gods. The god of the Nile, which is turned to blood. The god of the sun, which is blocked out. The gods of the field and forest. And so the Egyptians suffer with, plagues of locusts, plagues of lice, and hail. Each one of these elements is shown to have been mastered by the God of the universe, the God of Israel. And then finally, the final plague, because each time these plagues come, Pharaoh hardens his heart and says no. But in the end, he must relinquish to the God who brings down the most terrible plague of all, which is death. And on the night of Passover, we prepared to confront death. On the first night of Passover, some 3,500 years ago, our people did not sit around their tables. Indeed, as they waited for the angel of death to come and pass over the land, they waited, bated breath, standing as they ate, taking a lamb which they had separated from their herds, making sure it was perfect and spotless. After 7 days, they killed it. They took some hyssop, a green spongy plant, plunged it into the blood of the lamb, and splashed it over the doorposts of their home, the lintel and the doorpost, covering it with the blood of the lamb. In this way, they sealed their homes from the angel of death and waited. As the sun rose, they could hear the wails and cries in every Egyptian home as they knew that the firstborn of man and beast had passed away, died in the night. But in our homes, we were safe. And at that moment, indeed, Pharaoh acceded to the God of Israel. You know, we take no pleasure in the sufferings of any people, so we diminish from this cup 1 drop for each one of those plagues which the Egyptians suffered for us. And then we say again the blessing, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, haborei pri hagafen, blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth the fruit of the vine, in whom all things are yes and amen. In this way, the Passover now continues, and after the supper, the family, having had their supper, all wait for one of the children to come and find the afikomen, the very last thing eaten at the table. The father reveals the afikomen after the children find it. He gives the great reward to the one who finds it, and now it is brought out. the afikomen, the last thing eaten at the table. But let's take a closer look at this matzotash, the place from which it came, the special unity. Some people wonder if it means the three patriarchs of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or it means the king, the high priest, and the people. But you remember which piece we reached in and took the afikomen from? It wasn't the first or the third, it was the middle piece. But when was there ever a high priest like this one, who was hidden away, then brought back? And take a closer look, too, at this matzah from which the afikomen gets a picture. Because this bread is very unusual. It is pierced. It is also striped, but above all, it has been pierced and striped, which reminds us of these important words from Isaiah chapter 53, where Messiah is pictured, and the words describe him, saying he was pierced for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquity. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. And this cup, after the supper which Yeshua took, this cup which is always red wine, a symbol of the blood of the Lamb, which Yeshua says now, this is not the blood of a lamb, but indeed my blood in a new covenant, a new beginning given for you. These are the items of the third cup, the cup of praise. This is what Jesus did with his disciples, taking just a small portion of the bread, which is still taken in the home today, together with the third cup. But there's one more cup. After the supper, the cup of Elijah, because in the very last verses of the very last book, we read that before Messiah comes, Elijah is to come. So we know that the promise of Messiah is shown here in this Passover table. The promise of hope, the promise of salvation, which Yeshua knew his disciples would share. The very last words which I want to share with you are these words of the last that are said at the table. The Father has lifted the Passover bread up, the matzah, and he says to his family, "Behold the bread of affliction which our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. Then we were slaves, now we are free. This year we are here, next year in Jerusalem." Next year. For my people, it's always next year. But what did the Father say originally? Not that these things happened so long ago. They could have happened yesterday. These are the elements, not of what happened a long time ago, but what Messiah can do in your life today. When he takes care of all the chametz, the leaven out of your life, and he comes into your heart, he no longer needs to have any barrier between you, but rather he comes to us. 3,500 years ago, my people had to step through a doorway. Now Messiah comes into our hearts and makes Seder.